Bow Hunters, what is up? Welcome back to the podcast. This week's episode is brought to us by Raw World Company. You can visit them at rawworldcompany.com.au. They have some delicious biltong, delicious jerky, and more so some delicious coffee. But my favorite thing now is their chocolate. They've got some dark chocolate that is incredible. This stuff is sourced from Papua New Guinea, made over here in Australia. It's absolutely incredible product. But my favorite is where they mix the two together, where you've got chocolate-covered coffee beans, which I think are absolutely delicious. And you guys can get yourself 15% off on these ones via their website, and using the code BABH, it'll give you 15% off of rawworldcompany.com.au.
Hey there, and welcome to Becoming a Bow Hunter. I'm your host, Matty, and join me and our guests as we take the quality of meat back into our own hands, searching the wild for free-ranged animals to harvest as ethically as we can. I interview a variety of specialists from the bow hunting community to help fast-track your journey as a bow hunter. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this chinwag on one of your favorite topics in the world, bow hunting. Bow hunters, welcome back. Today, I'm actually joined by my wife, Stacey Turner. Welcome, Stacey.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
This is probably the podcast that I've actually been, I guess has been requested the most, is to say, hey, you work in health and fitness, you kind of provide this service for people. What would it take for bow hunting? And how do you kind of delve down the road of healthier bow hunters as well as fitter bow hunters to make sure that you guys can go out and get the job done when you're out in the field? And I mean, something that I've definitely witnessed plenty of times is trekking for hours and hours out in the field. And I'm quite fortunate to feel fit enough to be able to back it up and go again. And I mean, I've been out with different hunters, and I tend to feel that so far I've been able to out trek anyone, which has been nice. And I do relate that completely down to my nutrition and my fitness and the background that I've kind of come from. And what I guess the goal of today is to help you guys out with how you can become more fit and more healthy in yourself. And that's exactly what we do with our business, The Chief Life, and our company. We go out and we help other companies with doing wellness in the workplace profiles, where we go and literally, I guess, tailor it to that company and say, hey, what do you need the most help with? Like, do you have your team members that are traveling from interstate to interstate, and how can we help them with better sleep? How can we reduce stress mitigation, or reduce stress through stress mitigation? How can we improve their nutrition while they're on the road to make sure that things are going better and things are doing really well for them? Or if you've got a team that are just here, how do we make sure that we reduce stress, and how do we make sure that they're eating well, and how do we get rid of maybe, say, the chocolate bars out of the common room to make sure that they're not binging on that when it comes to that stressful moment and stressful month in time, and bits and pieces that come into play. And then on the other side of things, we go out to gyms and we help gyms with nutrition and helping individuals perform better through their nutrition. And nutrition is like in a car. When you put fuel into a car, you can either put bad fuel in and not get as good a result, or you can put really good fuel into the car and you can get a really great result from that car. And the same thing comes down to how your body operates. And if we've got extra fuel on the body, that looks like fat cells.
Jerry cans full of petrol, extra fuel.
Exactly. It might be good when you're full driving in the outback, but in Australia, but meaning on the body, it's not the best thing to have those extra jerry cans, and it's unhealthy. So, I mean, as a guidance point, guys, your waist measurement, so around your belly button, if you were to take a tape measure and go around your belly button, guys and girls have certain measurements. So the guys' measurement should be
94 centimeters or less.
Yeah, and the lady should be at 80 centimeters or less.
And that's to decrease risk of metabolic disease and other yucky stuff. Like, can decrease your risk by getting that circumference down lower.
Yeah, and so if you're above that, it's a fair sign to say, hey, I'm at an unhealthy size right now and I need to be working towards a smaller size because of what Stace just said, based around health and longevity.
And there's something that you said right at the start. You said, I feel lucky enough that I'm fit and healthy enough to manage it, but it's not luck. Yeah,
No,
like you work your butt off. So you make sure, even we've got a 3.5-week-old baby, and you're still making sure that you're prioritizing what you're putting in your body food-wise and training like daily.
Yeah,
So
fighting off that dad bod.
It's definitely not an accident.
And so I guess like there's some pretty interesting stats. Like 5% of all people who try to diet stick to their diet, which is pretty crazy. And
so fail then.
Exactly, like 95% failure rate, which is crazy. But when you look at it, diet is just the food that you eat. So at the moment you're on a diet, no matter who you are, you're dieting.
It's been given like a wrong
Exactly.
label.
It comes down to the food you're eating. And typically it comes down to the fact that people are either tired or they're hungry. That's the two main reasons why people fail. I would also go to say that they don't have a big enough reason as to why they're trying to utilize or trying to strengthen that.
Yeah.
Because typically we find when people have their mindset right, that they can then bring everything else onto like in line with it, and that's when they start to achieve some really good results. I mean, a lot of the gyms that we work with are actually CrossFit gyms, because those people come in and they work their asses off, and they're a certain personality that are willing to put in the effort.
Already super motivated.
Yeah, which is awesome, because it means we can almost just give them a meal plan and say, hey, this is how we start to achieve better results, and they will go and follow that to some extent.
I'd say the bowhunters as a generalization would be pretty motivated people too,
Pretty
right?
hard workers, yeah.
Yeah, to have to get out and go and do what you do and spend hours watching and searching and tracking and all that kind of stuff. It takes a certain kind of person with a lot of patience.
Yeah, definitely. I think most of the crew that I've met have been really good people, and some people have definitely asked for help online, and I've kind of given a little bit of guidance. And it's very interesting that things get quickly dismissed when you don't want to follow them because it doesn't suit what you want. And
that's not what I wanted to hear.
Yeah, exactly. And so realistically, we're going to give you some stuff today, and it comes down to whether you want to do it or not. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter to us, because our goal is to set out and help people, and that's something that we do daily with our job and our role.
But we can't help you unless you want to help yourself.
Exactly. So, yeah, I'm definitely very happy to give you guys some insights, and this is where it's going to come from. But at the end of the day, unless you're willing to put in the effort and put in the work, then yeah, it's not going to happen.
It might be a bit of a rude awakening.
Exactly. Now, I mean, we talk a lot about science. We talk a lot about the actual outcome as well. So the outcome of being unhealthy comes down to things like disease. So cancer, arthritis, heart disease, different bits and pieces. And I mean, some of this can come from hereditary, so genetics passed on from your family, but there's also a thing called epigenetics, which means we can change how our lifestyle is and how it affects us to make sure that we're not going to come out with that same outcome that, say, other family members might have had. So, for instance, there's plenty of stories of people who suffer from heart attacks at 50 years old, men who suffer from heart attacks at 50 years old, and it's happened for generation after generation. So 3 generations of men that have died once they're 50 plus years old from a heart attack. And then all of a sudden this last generation, the 4th generation, come through and say, well, hold up, I don't want to be that person. What have they been doing, and how can I change my lifestyle to make sure that I'm not going to die at 50? So they look into things like health and their nutrition. They look into things like movement and making sure that they're doing enough and not overdoing it, because that's also a thing, is hitting it too hard and going too much.
And then stress is a massive one.
Huge one. How much stress you've got in your day-to-day life, how much you're sleeping.
Where's your head at? Like how,
yeah.
Are you chill or are you highly strung? That's important things to look at as well.
So, I mean, and that person is someone, this is like, there's actually fully anecdotal proof of this, of people who will then live to be like 70, 80 years old because they've looked after their health. And it really does come down to, it becomes an everyday thing. It's not about, hey, for the next 4 weeks, because I've got a hunt coming up, I'm going to be healthy. Like, hey, that might be a good motivator, but how do you then continue that on and make it a lifestyle? And I think something that, for those in particular who are meat hunters, you guys have a really good resource, and you're probably chasing it because of the reason that it's a healthier meat. It's a free-range meat. It's really good quality for us. However, we need to look into the rest of your food and making sure that it's a really good quality for you as well, because at the end of the day, if you're going out and killing a deer and you're eating that deer on sandwiches every day, you're probably not going to be the healthiest individual because of the bread and the gluten and the bits and pieces. So we're going to dive into some things that might sound controversial, because we're going against the grain, because
literally
how we're told in Australia, based on the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating, is making people sick.
It really is.
which is crazy, right? Let that sink in for a little bit. It's making people sick on the daily. So some things we say might really
Stir things up.
and it might actually really hit home with you as well. So some stuff, a lot of stuff comes down to your gut health and how you're dealing with it, how your body responds. At the end of the day, for ultimate health, we need to reduce inflammation within the body. And there's foods that create inflammation within the body. And we've kind of narrowed it down to the fun 5 5 items. And we call it the fun 5 because it's typically the foods that people say, oh, but that's all the fun foods. So, Stace, maybe if you want to dive into the fun 5.
Yeah, for sure. So Matty kind of alluded to the first one, gluten. It's the
What's
protein.
gluten? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. It's the protein found in wheat. You've been doing this on your own too long. Mm-hmm. It's the protein found in wheat, and it can cause a lot of agitation for people in their gut. So some people are actually allergic to it, and some people just have more of an intolerance to it. But what we found through people that we've spoken with, podcasts that we've done, research that we've done, anyone that has a heartbeat actually has a reaction to gluten. And it's just because of the way that it gets processed, but it's also because our bodies aren't designed to deal with it. So it can cause inflammation, as Matty said, swelling of the gut, but there's also 3 other defense systems that we need to pay attention to: the brain, the skin, and the blood. So if somebody gets a rash, that would be a reaction to it. If somebody had some kind of blood disorder, they might have an issue with it. And the brain stuff comes on later that we don't really see.
That's like Alzheimer's and MS and dementia.
Yeah. We've got gluten.
So let's maybe pause there. So gluten is found in wheat, barley, and rye, which is typically a lot of the things that we're having in cereals and breads.
And cross-contamination in oats.
Yeah. So, or maybe let's talk about what you can have instead of. So it's not just about removing the food and saying, okay, well, what do I eat now?
You've left me with nothing.
Exactly. How do we change it around and what can we do instead? So if you're someone who eats bread every single day and you want to still keep some form of bread in, then maybe choose the gluten-free option. If you're not willing to do that, then a sourdough is probably the healthiest option you can do because it almost ferments the gluten out of it when it's going through a process.
Like an ancient grain. But not all gluten-free breads are created equal either.
They're not. They're definitely not. And I mean, there is a different range of them within the supermarket you can now get. And I mean, like the Helga's one is a pretty good one off the top of my head.
Country something.
Country Life, I think it is.
Yeah,
maybe.
yeah, that's a good one.
Like, I mean, they're brands that are not terrible. I mean,
they taste all right and they're not too expensive.
Exactly. So I mean, if that's a good alternative. When it comes to your cereals, it comes down to, I guess, trying to find a gluten-free option. So things like
We've
corn,
been using
Carmen's
gluten-free.
They've got gluten-free options. So I mean, it's going to come from ancient grains once again, not necessarily spelt, but there'll be things like buckwheat, there'll be things like corn, there'll be things like rice, amaranth, and different bits and pieces in it, rather than it just being cereal from wheat, barley, and rye, which are the ones that cause the issues.
Our body's then able to tolerate those better.
So the crazy thing is that gluten is a filler. And gluten is like glue, hence gluten. And so they use it as a filler in a lot of things. So things like sauces will have it. Things like ice cream will have it. Things like...
this one's crazy. The back of an envelope, when you lick it,
has gluten in it. I mean, even some of the products we use in the shower and stuff, like your soaps and your things like that, will have gluten in it, which is crazy. And if you've got a skin-related issue, this can really cause issues for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So swapping is definitely an important thing to think about.
Yeah, other options. I mean, it seems so many people think of it as a weird thing to have a hot breakfast, but really, you go out for breakfast, you get bacon and eggs. That's not a weird thing to have. So why can't you have steak and eggs or steak and... I don't know. I just think that it doesn't have to always be cereal, and it seems like that's a mind-blowing thing for some people.
Yeah, because it's society that tells us that we have to have cereal or toast for breakfast.
Marketed to for years.
We just don't have to follow that.
So that's gluten. Let's move into the next one.
Yep, so dairy. Some people have an issue with the protein found in dairy, which is whey and casein, and some people have an issue with the carbohydrate, which is lactose. We've talked about cereal, so if you're going to be getting a gluten-free muesli, then what are you going to have it with if you're not allowed to have yogurt or milk? And that's where we suggest nut milks, coconut milk. I know coconut's not a nut. It's just giving that as the example, other than almond milk, macadamia milk, all that sort of stuff. And again, we live in a day and age now where this stuff is super accessible. We can get it from the supermarket. There are options that don't have heaps of sugar in, because that's obviously something to watch out for. And then if you want to use yogurt, there's coconut yogurt, almond yogurt. So, I mean, we've just got so many amazing, delicious options. It's just making sure then that you don't get something flavoured that's full of crap.
What are the negative effects of dairy?
The negative effects, well, it can also cause inflammation in the gut. So those 4 defense systems, gut, blood, skin, and brain. And dairy is actually one of the ones that triggers a lot of the brain stuff later on. So they've found that it can deteriorate the myelin sheath, the layer that wraps around your neurons and is responsible for allowing a good message to be sent from the brain to the body. So, I mean, as bow hunters, you guys want to be able to keep using your bodies for a long, long time, and you need good connection from brain to body. So it's really important that you think about this stuff, because even though it's not for some people 10, 20, 30, 40 years that they might suffer from MS or Alzheimer's, it's important because you want to keep your brain tip-top.
So I think something that we didn't really talk about is the side effects, which comes down to, once again, bloating in the stomach, diarrhea, gassiness in general. So, I mean, if you're getting the farts after drinking milk, and I've been hunting out with people before who have drinking milk, and straight away...
Can we name names? He's been on the podcast.
Right, he's coming back soon. And I mean... They fart like no tomorrow after they drink a heap of milk.
And we laugh about it, but it's actually really serious because it's your body's way of telling you something's wrong.
Exactly right. It's saying, hey, I'm not dealing well with that. The other thing is like blocked nose. If you're a snorer and you're drinking a heap of dairy, we find a lot of the time once people drop dairy that they tend to not snore as much.
Which means they're then sleeping better, which then domino effect of a positive outcome for all of their health, really.
So, I mean, there's obviously the longer ramifications, which is what Stace kind of delved into. But, I mean, on a short note, you can see, daily note, like you can see better breathing, better sleep, less bloating, and regular, like I guess a regular consistent toilet pattern, which is actually really important.
And if you are waking up tired because of snoring or because of like breathing difficulties, then you're probably not performing at your best throughout the day, no matter what you're doing, whether it's on a hunt or at work, or just in your general life. And so if you improve that stuff, then your whole life gets better because your interactions are more positive and happy, and you can focus better. Just, so many positive things that come out of it.
Yeah, there really is. And I mean, at the end of the day, what we recommend, once again, for some of this thing, it might seem controversial to you, but we would recommend at least removing it for 30 days from your diet, reintroducing it, and seeing for yourself how it responds. And most people, 99.9% of people, would tell us, hey, yes, dairy is definitely a thing, or yes, gluten's definitely a thing that inflames me and I feel bad after I reintroduce it.
And I feel really good when I'm off it.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of the time people are scared to almost put it back in because they're like, I'm feeling so freaking good that I don't want to put my body through that drowsiness or that, I guess, attack again, so it does become so drowsy and tired and whatever else.
Yeah.
One thing I was going to say, I completely forgot.
Because we're a little sleep deprived with a new baby in the house.
Raw milk is actually better for you than the milk that you'd be getting from the shop. So your pasteurized and homogenized milk, what they do is going through a process of removing the nutrients essentially from the fats, and that's where we get all the goodness from. So if you can get raw milk...
Not that we're telling you to do that.
No, exactly, even though it's illegal. So you didn't hear it from us, and it's not actually something that we're saying to go do. But you can buy bath milk, and what you do...
choose to do with it is up to you.
But I have chosen to drink some bath milk a few times.
Because we knew that it was refrigerated from farm to shop.
And I actually don't have the side effects from that I do if I get the homogenized and pasteurized milk, which is pretty crazy. Plus, it's got the cream top, which is delicious.
It's like drinking it straight out the cow.
Which is what I actually grew up on, which is crazy that now you're not allowed to do that. That's completely illegal. So the next one going into it.
Well, I mentioned sugar before as like an additive to some foods that you might want to buy as alternatives to the gluten and dairy options, but sometimes they will have sugar in, and that is one of the fun 5 that can cause issues in the body. A lot of those symptoms that Matty mentioned before. So it's always good to check the ingredients label and just see, does it say sugar, cane sugar? I mean, there's other names that they use for it to try and hide it. But if you do see it in there, at least make sure it's not the first or second ingredient on the list, because they put it in the order of most to least of each ingredient. So if it's one of the last ingredients, it's not going to be the end of the world. But if you can get something that doesn't even have sugar on the label, even better.
And so the big thing with sugar is that it creates a spike within your system, within your blood levels, and what that does is almost spike your energy. It spikes your mood. The issue with that is that once we've got a high level of sugar spiked in your body says, hey, I've got too much of that. I'm going to try store it away by releasing some insulin. So the insulin gets released, and it pretty much like tapers back down that energy response, and it tries to store that as fat for later on. It's like, hey,
there's those jerry cans again.
This will be good for a rainy day. I'm going to put it to the side so we can utilize that later. And what ends up happening is you go from this extreme spike in energy to having almost like a crash because you've had so much sugar that your body needs to release so much insulin that it drops it all the way back down below a healthy level to be staying at for your blood sugar levels, that you come into like almost like a crashed mood. So this is why people would typically eat breakfast at 6 a.m. and then all of a sudden they've crashed by 8 a.m.
Or even less sometimes if it's sugary.
Yeah, sometimes it can be within like
half an hour,
20 minutes, half an hour, so if you're giving your kids Cocoa Pops and all of a sudden they've crashed out before they've even gone to school, it's kind of like that sugar burst that they get. And I mean, you see it, and kids are really good to see it in, because you give them sugar, they go crazy for like 30 minutes and then they crash out and they're grumpy as hell.
Yeah.
And that's a good response, as to say, like, that's exactly what's happening to you. It's just that you've got maybe a bit more
awareness,
regulations, and around
you're not going to have a tantrum.
Exactly.
Well, we can't speak for everyone.
Adults definitely do. But I mean, mood can really be solved by reducing or removing sugar,
and
which is
people
crazy.
can get cravings. So if they have that, as you said, Matty, with this sudden high and then a crashing low, they start to get cravings, and then they're like searching for whatever it was that gave them that high before, because the body just tells them, give me more sugar, I need more of that that you just gave me, I need to feel that high again, and becomes quite addictive. Matty mentioned that it does affect your mood, so you get the spike in energy, but you also get the spike in happiness, and that's because of two hormones that get released when we eat sugar, serotonin and dopamine. But once insulin does its job of clearing the sugar from the blood and putting it as storage or using up a little bit for energy, so do those happy hormones disappear. And so then people are actually feeling like they're depressed or lethargic or bipolar or, up and down, and it's literally the food people are eating. So if somebody's eating a very carby diet, you want to sing your song?
I can't remember.
I'm a carby.
I'm a carby girl in a carby world.
So if you're eating like cereal or toast for breakfast, you have maybe a coffee with some milk and sugar in it for morning tea, you have a sandwich for lunch, chocolate bar for afternoon snack, and then pasta or pizza for dinner. You're literally going from carb to carb to carb and wondering why you're exhausted and lethargic.
Regarding the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating, that's not a terrible diet, but what's happening each time you eat those foods is that you're getting storage of fat, adipose tissue, because your body's like, hey, I'm going to save this for a rainy day. Once again, like, this is too much energy for me right now to deal with. I'm going to save it for later. And people really talk about, well, I need to carb load before I go out on the hunt, or I need to carb load if I'm going to get through my day. But once again, if we're carb loading too much, only so much gets stored as glycogen, which is the energy that is used from the muscles, essentially, to be able to do exercise. And when we eat too much, once again, it gets stored as fat.
Yeah, and even if you were exercising lots between those meals, you're still not putting the right nutrients in your body to keep your hormones at a level to give you energy. Like, you're still going to get those crashing lows because of the sugar spike and then the sugar crash.
And people, when they remove sugar, typically get cravings for days. They typically feel low for days, like energy less, because what's happening is your body is transitioning from being a sugar burner essentially to being a fat burner, and that can be like a 7 to 14 day process. So people will say, well, I tried to go no carbs or like low carb, and it was terrible for me. I can't do it. I can't deal with it. And all it is, your body, it's just going through a detox phase, really.
And it's making sure that you're swapping again. Like, that word swap is so important rather than remove. Like, you're not just going to remove all the carbs. So I gave an example of a typical diet. That's actually how I used to eat when I was at uni studying nutrition. What we want to encourage people to do is make sure they're getting some kind of protein, which I'd say is a bit easier for you guys because you do enjoy your meat, but making sure that you're getting some kind of animal protein at every meal and every snack, some kind of good quality carbohydrate, which includes fruit and veg or any of the gluten-free options that we were talking about before. And
it comes down to like rices and quinoa and bits and pieces as well, grains, potatoes.
Sweet potato, yeah, exactly. And then some kind of good fat. So avocado, nuts and seeds, oils, coconut.
Quality oils.
Quality
oils, we
yeah.
should say.
Olive oil, coconut oil. So all of that stuff, making sure you're getting all 3 pieces of the puzzle every single time you eat. And that's going to stop that roller coaster of ups and downs of the sugar that we talked about and keep you more even energy-wise. So even if you are going on a hunt, you'd want to take snacks with you so that you're eating regularly. Like take some jerky or a tin of tuna with, some dried fruit and some nuts and have that throughout every few hours so that you don't have a dive.
And it's stuff that you can take that you can have for a few days at a time. Like it's not going to go off on you.
Yeah.
People say, well, I can't eat healthy when I'm hunting. I just need to eat from a packet. I'm going to take Tim Tams. And it's like, no, well, that's not going to get you through the day very well.
Actually, while we're talking about jerky, Raw World
yeah,
is
correct.
awesome jerky. Like that's what we recommend to all our Chief Life clients as well.
And you guys can get, I think it's 20% off with
Wow.
the code BABH.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, which is awesome.
That's amazing.
They've been really awesome with us. We like.
They've got chocolate covered coffee beans
they do
now.
have chocolate covered coffee beans, and that's
Not
actually
that I've
something
had
else.
any because I'm breastfeeding, but
Yeah, it's definitely something that I wanted. It's actually going to be, they're coming back on as advertisers, which is awesome. So you'll probably hear them at the start of this podcast.
That's cool.
But yeah, so they've been really great. And I mean, we enjoy their jerky. I actually have their coffee, and we're going to talk about caffeine in a second. But
Yes.
also the coffee beans covered in chocolate, and they've got some delicious new dark chocolate just in general. Bars of chocolate, which is
while we're
it's
talking
actually
about
to die
health,
for.
and then we're just telling you about the other sneaky stuff on the side. So I guess we've talked about 3 of the fun 5 so far. Anything you want to add about sugar?
I think it's a highly addictive substance. So people have it and then remove it and they feel incredibly crap without it. So they just fall back into the trigger of having it again. The biggest thing is like fight through it almost. Like you need to set your mind right. Hey, I'm going to quit sugar. Give yourself a good 14 days like of off sugar and really do what it takes. Out of sight, out of mind is probably the best method with it. And then set yourself goals around it. Like, hey, I don't know, like whenever you typically eat sugar, that's the time that you should be trying to do something else, or that's the time that you should try to supplement with something else. Things like herbal teas, things like cinnamon, things like, what else?
I mean, you could use ginger,
Yeah, ginger and fruits in general are really good for cutting that craving.
but still having your protein and your fats with it.
Exactly right. And so when it comes to sugar, the biggest thing is getting over that addiction to start with, and it's actually been shown to be more addictive than cocaine, which is quite crazy.
Because it triggers the same reward center in the
Yeah.
brain. I actually thought I was bipolar when I would eat carb. And then once we started to eat this way, my energy and my mood just improved so much that I was like, oh no, that was the food that I was eating, not actually.
Yeah, and I think going back to what I was talking about before when you kind of were talking about, like we're joking about the dark chocolate and stuff, but you don't remove it forever. You don't we're not saying, hey, never have these foods again. We're saying, hey, remove it, reintroduce it, see the effect it has on your body, but have it less is the big thing. It's not having it every single day.
And while you're mentioning that, because I was going to allude to that later, it's finding things that are better quality. So we would not eat Cadbury's.
No.
Because it's full of crap. But we can find something that's a better quality dark chocolate that's, from good quality sources like Raw World.
Yeah,
We're going to do that.
His whole
philosophy
is the fact that he comes from Papua New Guinea. He's giving back to the Papua New Guinea community. So what he does is he orders all of his beans from there. He orders all his chocolate, like the cacao from there, and makes it all up here in Australia, which I think is absolutely incredible. So, yeah.
So it's like supporting fair trade kind of stuff.
Exactly. Hence why I've kind of connected with Xavier and worked so closely with him. So that's that.
That's sugar?
We touched on caffeine briefly. Well, I said caffeine, but caffeine is one of the fun 5, and this is something this is actually the one we get the most pushback from, which is crazy. But people are like, oh, you can't take my daily cup of char away from me, stuff that. I'm never giving up coffee. It's what gets me through my day, and it's pretty funny. But it has kind of similar effects to what sugar does. It gives you extreme spikes and extreme lows.
But it's also acidic.
It is acidic, and there's a lot of things, and pretty much we went through and we end up finding more and more and more studies on it because we kept getting more and more pushback on it. So we're like, hey, how do we get people to start to actually realize that caffeine is not the golden dream that it's made out to be, and how do we start to kind of show people, hey, if you can remove it for 30 days, reintroduce it and see how you actually respond. And the biggest thing, I think, is that there's 2 types of metabolizers of caffeine. There's a fast metabolizer and a slow metabolizer. So a fast metabolizer is someone who will have caffeine and caffeinated beverage, or caffeine in general. So caffeine comes from coffee, teas.
Not herbal teas.
Not herbal teas, but yeah, teas. You'll get it from energy drinks, from pre-workouts, from chocolate, and
but
from,
not in as much.
No, and then even soft drinks. I don't know if I said that.
No, you didn't.
And also, like, obviously your coffee or your chocolate flavored ice creams, or different milks and bits and pieces. So your fast metabolizer is someone who will have some caffeine. They might get the spike in energy, and then it wears out of their system, and that's all. That's the side effects that they have of it. People might say, hey, that's me straight off the bat. That's definitely me. But what we need to do is actually remove it from your body to see how you respond to it, because you build up a tolerance to caffeine. So if you have a cup of coffee every single day, the requirement all of a sudden increases to a cup and a quarter that you need to be able to get the same hit. And your body starts to build up this tolerance, and you say, hey, well, hold up, all of a sudden I'm having 2 coffees, or all of a sudden I'm having 3 coffees or 3 caffeinated beverages a day. And it's because your body's built up this tolerance to be able to do that. So we need to remove that by reducing or removing caffeine from your system completely. Then we reintroduce it and see how your body actually responds.
Because if you're a slow metabolizer, it can take 2 to 3 days to leave your system. And then if you're compounding that with a couple of coffees a day, and then you notice that you get heart palpitations, you're quite jittery, highly strung, anxious, stressed.
They're all signs of caffeine's not working well for you. So slow metabolizers are pretty much what Stacey just said. Someone who will have caffeine, it will stay in their system for a few days at a time. It can do things like affect your sleep. It can do things like make you more anxious, like Stacey was just saying. The big signs really come down to highly strung people typically should not be having high amounts of caffeine, if any at all, which is kind of crazy. But once you remove it, these people really start to thrive.
And you can do decaf. So if you like the taste of coffee, there are some amazing decafs out there. We just really encourage people to look at whether it's been
chemically processed or Swiss water decaf.
Swiss water is what you want to do, and that means that it's been electrocuted to remove the caffeine, as opposed to put in a solvent, because if it's put in chemicals, then the chemicals end up in your body, whereas we obviously don't want that. So if you can get a good quality Swiss water decaf coffee, go for gold. And then obviously, you're going to have it with your almond milk, or just have it black, because you're not having dairy for at least a month.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we both love the taste of coffee, and I'm not good with caffeine, so I haven't actually had any for almost a year now, but when I do go back to it, it will be decaf.
Yeah.
And I just love the taste.
And, I mean, typically it's the habitual factor, like Stacey was saying, of having that cup of coffee in the morning, or having a cup of tea in the morning. So swapping it out for either like a herbal remedy, a herbal tea, licorice tea, chamomile,
ginger, lemon.
Rooibos is a really good one. It's like pretty typical to black tea. Or your decaf coffee, and you're set. It's just about swapping that out. And once again, you're probably going to get a headache. You're probably going to get cravings from it straight away. And when I removed caffeine for the first time, I realized how much of an effect it had on my body, because I was in such a shitty state for a few days where I literally had like brain fog and a headache for, I think it was 3 days straight. And that was kind of, for so many people, like, oh my God, I'm not functioning, I need to have my coffee. But for me, that was the realization of, hold up, I need this out of body supplement to get me through a day. That's not called for. Like, your body has everything it needs to get through a day. And if you're waking up and you're feeling terrible because of something that you're having, then that's not a good thing.
I think it was the wake-up call for you to go, oh, my goodness, this is affecting me quite negatively. I need a break from it. And so you'll periodically do a month off.
Yeah.
And then that resets your system. You've got your baseline back, so that then you can have a coffee a day and it doesn't affect you.
So, I mean, I'll have a year, like every year I'll have a detox or two from caffeine, which I strongly recommend. I think that's great.
Yeah. And maybe if this seems overwhelming because you're eating all of these, we haven't even mentioned the last one yet, but you're eating all of these or drinking all of these, and it's like, I don't want to do all of them at once. Start with one.
Yeah.
And remove that for 4 weeks. And then you might start to feel a bit better, or remove it for a couple of weeks and then add another layer. Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a lot more that we can touch on caffeine, but really what I'm going to do is actually send you to a podcast we've done, which is on the Chief Life podcast. It's episode 101. That's all on caffeine. That's a really good insight to that. And really, all of these topics we're touching on now have full hour-long episodes on the Chief Life podcast.
And also recovery after stroke. We did the full Fun 5 with him as well. So the last one that's probably going to be...
Another one that we get a lot of pushback from. I mean, in particular, in a hunting camp, like, it's definitely something nice to come back to after a day of work or a day of hard in the field, is having a beer or something. And alcohol is a big thing. And
the problem with beer is that it's alcohol, sugar, and gluten.
All
so
packed
you've
into
got
one.
3 of the 5 in one place.
It's funny. I've had so many people say, "Hey, mate, we need to catch up. We should go out for a beer." I'm like, "Oh,
I don't drink
I
beer.
don't really drink beer. Like, give me a Corona maybe, or
Because Corona's gluten-free.
Yeah, it's made on either corn or potato. And then also, I think Han have just brought out one, potato-based gluten-free one. But, I mean, what happens every time I drink I drink beer is that I get bloated and I have a shit night. So it's not worth it. Like, I literally get stomach pains and it's like, well, that's terrible. I just have to go home. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So when it comes to alcohol, it can stay in your system for up to 90 days.
Like in your hair follicles and whatnot.
So on a cellular level. So what happens is we as humans operate really well because we've got a bazillion cells in our body. And in each cell, we've got this thing called mitochondria, which is like the battery pack, the thing that gives you the energy. And when we drink alcohol, these little cells get affected, or the mitochondria in particular get affected, and it shrivels up and is not as effective as it should be. So not as efficient as it should be. And when we're dehydrated, when we're full of caffeine, full of these different foods and full of alcohol in particular, it can really negatively affect your mitochondria, which in turn slows you right down. So after a big night out of drinking, you'll feel this like tenfold, where you wake up with a hangover, you're not responding very well. It's because your body is in hell. Like your mitochondria state is not in a good way.
And I was going to say, it doesn't even have to be a big night. You know, if you're doing a few days hunt and you're camping and you have a couple of beers, it can still affect you the next day in terms of dehydration. And when you want to be able to be in your most optimal form to go out again early that next morning, it might be worth considering something else as your wind down option of an evening.
Anything over one drink is counted as stressful in the body. So it's funny, people say, I'm going to use this as a wind me down, or something just to calm the system down. Exactly. Mm-hmm. But what actually happens is it's kind of like Armageddon in the body. You have your second, third, fourth drink of the night, and your body starts to really, it puts into a stressful state.
It's in its fight or flight response.
Exactly. And then when you go to sleep, once again, you're not getting a good deep level of sleep. So you're going out and you're hunting and you're having 4 beers a night every single night. You're not going to be waking up optimally, which means maybe potentially those shots in the following days are not going to be great. So it's just something to have a think on. But that's the fun 5 list. When it comes to swapping out alcohol, we really say like, hey, try to utilize similar things like a wine glass. If you're used to having a wine every night, you still use a wine glass, but have like some sparkling mineral water instead in it. Like lime and soda water is great. Yeah, and that's typically like your caffeine. It's about having that habitual factor every single day, doing that thing that you've always done.
I mean, you could do cider if you wanted to completely avoid the gluten.
Yeah.
But again, you've still got alcohol and sugar.
Yeah.
You could, if you're like a spirit drinker, just have a neat shot of something, like enjoy a whiskey or something.
I mean, when it comes to drinking, there's definitely healthier ways to do it.
Just have a glass of whiskey, like a small nip.
Yeah. Having, like Stacey said, your ciders, having like
vodka.
It's a little bit dry, vodka or gin bites, with water and lime, or with soda water and lime, is going to be a healthier option for you. Like those clear ones are great. Yeah. I mean, some people just say, well, you know what, I just love a Jim Beam and Coke. And it's like, hey, that's all right if it's every once in a while. If it's every single night, you're probably going to start to see some health effects, and you might see your waistline starts to grow, and then you might start to feel less confident in yourself, and you might start to complain, and you know that you've only got yourself to blame because, hey, you wanted that Jim Beam and Coke every single night.
And one of the things that people think about when they're wanting to go on a diet, in inverted commas, because obviously Matty explained that just diet is just way of eating. They think about the need to lose weight, and that's a very aesthetic thing. That's a very visual thing. It's almost a bit vain, but it seems to be what like the media kind of pushes everyone to think about, right? So we've talked about waist circumference because that's a physical measure, and that's what we encourage people to focus on more so than the number on the scales or what they look like. What's more important is how people feel. So if you're listening to this and you're saying, oh, I feel really tired, I feel lethargic, I get angry easily, I get pissed off with people, that's the feelings that we're talking about. So if you're like, okay, I don't want to feel shit anymore, I'd rather feel a bit better, then what can you do? And that's starting to do some of these health-related things that you think about in terms of decreasing your weight or looking a different way, but that's just the byproduct, that's the outcome, that's not the process. So if you focus on how you feel on the daily as the process, because that's what you want the benefit to be. And then as a side bonus to that, you'll lean up, you'll get healthier, life will be easier.
And it's funny, we haven't touched on exercise at all yet, but when you think about it, if you can knock 20 kilos off of your everyday pack carry because you're walking around 20 kilos lighter, all of a sudden everything's going to become a hell of a lot easier when you're walking up hills. And so, I mean, that's why we've really focused on this side first. Movement's great, but if you want to be healthier or leaner, fitter in general, it's going to come from your food first. It's definitely like, I would say 90% of it comes down to what fuel you're putting into the body. The rest of it, 10%, is from the movement that you're doing.
Abs are made in the kitchen.
100%. So that is the fun 5. That's all we're going to really touch on when it comes to nutrition today. I think that's a good place to start. Once again, we're not saying remove them forever. We're saying reduce or remove for 30 days at least. See how you feel, see how you lean up, see how you go. Once again, this is what we do with our business. If you wanted more help, then please reach out. We're definitely happy to help with that.
Absolutely. And just to give you an example, like Matty's saying, try it and then add them back in and see how you go. For us personally, we both avoid gluten 100%. We'll try to avoid dairy most of the time.
Yeah, I have it every once in a while.
And then Matty will have caffeine, I won't. And then sugar and alcohol will be every now and then. Like we might do, coconut ice cream on a Saturday night or...
That's
gluten-free, dairy-free ice cream. And we found some good stuff. So it tastes delicious and we still get to enjoy it. So there's some sugar going in there, but we're still avoiding the gluten and dairy. And then with alcohol for me, I mean, I haven't had any for ages, but it would just be special events. And Matty might have more coming into the Christmas season and then kind of cleans the slate come the new year.
Yeah, I mean, I had one drink last week because we had a celebration. And then outside of that, I haven't had one for probably 4 months.
Yeah. You went sympathy alcohol-free with me.
So moving into the movement side, movement. When it comes to physical activity for increasing your power and increasing your speed and increasing your fitness.
Just do CrossFit.
In particular for bow hunting, the things that typically stand out for me is pulling power, so being able to pull back, making sure your draw weight is big enough for pulling. Draw weight is big enough for hunting, which comes down to any sort of rows. So, for instance, like a bent over row, an upright row,
even
lateral.
Doing rowing machine, even though that's cardio.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's good for your fitness in general. Cardio is always good when you're up on the hill, but things like lat pull downs, anything you can do with your upper back is going to be really good. Not in particular shoulder press. Like, yes, that will help. And pressing does come into drawing a bow back. You press and you pull at the same time. So upper body work is really important. But I think that your pull is going to be more important than your push. The push is more of a stabilizer. The pull is what happens, is with the action.
And naturally, people are better at pushing anyway because we do that a lot more in our daily lives.
Yeah.
Whereas pulling something that we actively have to practice and work on because it's not a common action.
Yeah, and I mean, if you were to hop behind a car and try push it, you push it with a straight arm, and that's what we're typically aiming for with bow hunting. Is you're trying to straighten that front arm out so you can pull the back arm back. So once you've got that lock on, it makes it a hell of a lot easier to push forward. So yes, bench and shoulder press and bits and pieces are going to be important, but doing things like pull-ups, lat pull-down, bent over rows, regular rows, meadow rows.
Seated row.
Yeah, seated row, bent over row with a dumbbell. So single as well as multi-arm is going to be really important and really useful. And we're talking about reps and sets in high frequency. We want to see a mix of both, actually. We want to see hypertrophy, so you're doing maybe 5 sets of 15. But then we also want to see at a lighter weight. We also want to see some max out sets where you're doing like a 1 rep, a 5 rep, a 10 rep max.
Going as heavy as you can.
Yeah, and so with a max out set, what you might do, say for instance, a good day for back would look like, okay, I'm going to do 1 set, depending on your skill level, 1 set of max weight lat pull downs, or if you can, 1 set of max pull ups. So those two are very similar items or very similar movements. You might follow that up with 5 sets of 15 seated rows on a, say, a machine, or if you don't have a machine, bent over rows with a barbell or a dumbbell.
Or you could use a band.
Yep.
Seated.
And then you might follow up with something like some banded pull-aparts or like some lateral reverse rows or rises, which is kind of like a fly out to the side. And you might follow up with like a set of 50 of those with lightweight.
And you could YouTube any of the things that
Yeah,
Matty just
definitely.
said, and there'd be videos on there of how to do them.
Yeah, and if you really want to, then you could finish up with some biceps because girls love arms. So, I mean, that would be a really good session that you could be done within 30 minutes, 45 minutes. Like, it's not a hard amount of work to get in to do, but it could be really beneficial. When
Yeah.
it comes to chest, once again, same sort of thing. You want to be doing some bench, want to be doing some shoulder press, want to be doing maybe some upright rows, some lateral raises, stuff like that's going to really help out. But it's not necessarily the most important. Like, if you can do your functional movements, the movements that you get your most bang for buck on, which is your bench press, your shoulder press, your pull up or your row, your squat and your deadlift, they're going to be the things that you get the most out of. So I'd say start your workout every time with one of those, finish up with the accessory pieces, which is all those extra pieces we're just kind of talking about.
And the functional movements that you just spoke about, even though they work a body part, like people think of squats as working the legs, there's also such a focus on core, which is obviously so
Yeah,
important for
you don't
bow
think about your midline,
hunting.
yeah.
Oh, so important. Like, I'm a little person, and I mean, I've had a go at shooting your bow a few times.
Yeah.
And I'd say having a strong core has been a massive help in that, because that's,
Definitely.
you know, when we've, you know, had people give it a go on our retreats that we run,
Yeah.
the ones that struggle are the ones that just have no midline.
Yeah, definitely. And so when it comes to trekking, we obviously use our legs a lot. And so many people think of it as it's just cardio. Where so many people go wrong is that they think it's just cardio because you need strength in your legs. And what's really interesting is you look at any sprinter and they're really strong. They're a really strong individual. They're explosive individuals as well, which helps them for building muscle, but they're strong individuals. When we look at elite runners, like long distance runners, the ones that do best are the ones that focus on extra hamstring work. So doing extra strength work to help them with their strides and getting more out of it. So realistically, a lot of stuff we do is uphill, downhill. Yes, you need your quads, but I would say your focus needs to be more on your glutes and your hammies. So lots more on your squats are great. Squats should be done all the time, and squats properly. But I think deadlifts and step ups and things like that are going to be more beneficial.
Lunges.
Lunges are going to be more beneficial for bow hunters in general. So with movement, it really comes down to making sure that you're moving correctly. Technique is massive. If you're doing squats and you're doing them on your toes and your knees are forward and they're caving in as you stand.
And it's a short range of motion.
Yeah, you're going to injure yourself. Like, it's down, hands down, you're going to get hurt, and it's not great. Like, the whole goal of this is to make you better. So get yourself a coach who knows what they're doing. Making sure that you're moving well. Like, film yourself while you move and send it to someone. Like, say, hey, is this a good squat or not? Like, the amount of gym fails you see online is ridiculous, but I mean, the amount of people that think they're doing something right because they've never been told any differently is also ridiculous.
And I made a joke when we started talking about movement that just do CrossFit. But the reason is that when you go to a CrossFit gym that has good coaches, they do look at your technique and they do a full range of variety, like constantly varied movement. They're all different weights, all different lengths and of duration of workouts. So it is quite a beneficial basis, but it doesn't mean you have to do it. But obviously, as Matty's saying, get eyes on, because if you're not doing it right.
The other gym I'd really recommend is either a powerlifting gym or a strongman gym. Like, both of those can be really good for helping you with your
posterior chain.
Yeah, and helping you with muscle gain in general, strength in general. But then you just say, hey, this is my goal. My goal is bow hunting. I'm going to come here 3 times a week and you're just going to help me out with gaining that muscular strength. I'm going to do the rest of the stuff, the endurance stuff outside of here, which means you're going to have to be doing maybe some pack walks or... so, I mean, a good way to do a pack walk is stuff your bag full of water bottles, like full water bottles, and just walk. Like, that's a great way to do it. Find some hills and do some hill sprints. 10 minutes of work is really quite... That's like enough to some extent if it's intense work.
But also ease in. Like, if you're going from not doing any of this stuff, Matty's just explained a heap of amazing exercises, but ease into that, build it up slowly over time.
Yeah, but I mean, like, an EMOM, so doing something every minute and hitting that requirement every single minute for, say, 10 minutes is a good way to do it. So you might do a 30-meter sprint every single minute for 10 minutes, and that's a great way to kind of get a quick workout in. So, I mean, there's a lot that we can really delve into with exercise, but I think the best thing to say is go and find yourself a gym, go and find yourself a gym buddy, or get yourself a PT or a coach or something like that, where you're just going to you have the motivation there. All you need to do is get yourself to the space.
And if you guys have found this beneficial and you have specific questions, send them to Matty and then we can do a part 2.
Yeah, definitely. But I have to roll because I've got a call.
But I just wanted to say real quick that I am so excited to have a husband that is a hunter because we get to have amazing meat. So, you know, even if you just get your partners to listen to this little bit of the podcast, I highly encourage them to let you guys go out.
The downfalls of hunting. Stacey actually sent me this article. It was like, so you married a hunter or something. It was hilarious. Like all the things that start to happen, like the wardrobe comes out with all of these camo gear. Your shed starts to fill up with all these extra bits and pieces. I'm like, holy shit.
The bank account has no money in
it. All these extra things start happening. Like, there's weird targets in your backyard. And it's just funny.
I had a boyfriend of a friend come around yesterday and they were like, why are there so many skulls in your house? Didn't even really realize. But anyway,
yeah, pretty funny. Anyway, team, thank you very much. If you did enjoy this, please yell out. Like I said, this is one of the most requested things I've had since I started the podcast. So I hope you guys really enjoyed it. We've given you guys some really solid gold insight, and this is something that people usually pay us for. So enjoy it. Use it. If you're not going to use it, don't complain. I don't want to hear...
Stop being a pussy.
Exactly. I don't want to hear why you're not getting results if you're not going to try utilize any of this stuff. So I think there's a great health focus in the world, and I think there's a great health focus in bow hunting in particular, but I've definitely seen there's a very unhealthy community within the space as well. So at the end of the day, our goal is always to help individuals, help you guys out, make sure that disease is not a thing that's breaking hearts all around the world, and making sure that you're functioning at an optimal level and thriving as an individual. That's what we always wanted to do when we started our company. So
get on it.
Get on it. Thanks, team.
Thank you.
That's it, guys. That's a wrap. Thank you so much for joining us this week on Becoming a Bow Hunter. You guys can follow along with the journey at becomingabowhunter.podcast on Instagram and Facebook. You can also head across to the YouTube channel, which is Becoming a Bow Hunter. So guys, follow along. We've got a whole heap of different recipe videos up there, as well as different snippets from along the way, along the journey so far. If you guys do enjoy the show, please pass it around. If you got something out of this show, then I'm sure another bow hunter, another friend of yours would get a hell of a lot out of it as well. So please share the love, share the podcast, and thank you so much for tuning in.